let's go to this story here about RFK, Jill Stein, and Cornell West. So now we're about to enter 2024. I think it's time to take a look at the strategy that these three candidates in particular have been using in reference to their 2024 race. We're focusing on these three. Why? Because they are the ones that are actually polling in reference to third party and independent candidates. So we're focusing on RFK, we're focusing on Cornel West and Jill Stein. Let's start with RFK. And at the end, I'm going to tell you who I think has the best strategy by far. I know some of you are like, oh, Sabby, you're going to be biased. No, I don't think so. We're going to talk about this. We're going to break this down. First, we're going to start with RFK Jr. RFK Jr., his strategy right now has changed. Like, it's changed a couple of times throughout his campaign. You guys know how I feel about RFK Jr. I think his position on Israel is bullshit. You guys know that. I don't need to go over that all over again. But in reference to the strategy, I want to show you something that he's doing in reference to ballot access. Now, RFK Jr. has a super PAC. That's not a secret. I've shared that with you before. But look at this. RFK Jr. super PAC rolls out ballot access priorities. So this is a change. They have changed how they're doing things with this race. American values. Let's start from the beginning. The super PAC supported RFK Jr.'s presidential bid is narrowing its ballot access campaign to focus on 7 states. 7 states, guys, including crucial battlegrounds that will determine the outcome of the presidential election. This is different. So they're not focusing on all 50 states. They're focusing on 7 states in particular. Let's see what those states are. American Values 2024 will now prioritize helping to get Kennedy on the ballot in Arizona, California, Georgia, Illinois, Michigan, New York, and Texas. Let's take a look at those states. This is crucial, right? According to plans first shared with Politico. Now, why do I think this is actually smart? Arizona, that was actually the state that had a lot of independent voters come out to support Joe Biden for 2020. Arizona will be important. I'll mention that again with Jill Stein when we get to her. California, that's his home state. So that's all I got for that one. Sorry. Georgia. Again, Georgia was a state that Joe Biden won. It was a red state. He turned it blue for 2020. There were a lot of young voters that came out heavily to support Joe Biden in Georgia, and a lot of African-American voters that came out to support Joe Biden in Georgia. Again, that state could change the race. Illinois is interesting. It's typically a blue state. I haven't come up with an answer for that one yet. I'm not quite sure why they picked that one. Come back to me later. Michigan. This one is huge. Michigan is one of the states that Joe Biden cannot lose. He is already doing poorly with voters in Michigan, particularly Muslim voters. They have voiced this. We've talked about this before on the show. So that is one of the states that he's focusing on there. That could be a game changer. New York. New York is interesting because in New York, and Jill Stein will have to deal with this too, she's not going to be able to run as a Green Party candidate in New York. They made it more difficult for third party candidates, right? So she will have to run as an independent in New York the same way that RFK Jr. is going to run. But also, that's Trump's state. That's Trump's home state. So think about that. And last but not least, Texas. And why do I think they chose Texas? It's a border state. RFK Jr. went down to the border. He talked about the issue with migrants coming across the border, and he said that it was worse than he thought it was when he saw it with his own eyes. So obviously, Texas is going to be one of those states. So he can potentially win over voters in Texas on that issue alone. That's actually smart. Let me continue. Half of these target states were decisive in the 2020 race and won by now President Joe Biden by narrow margins. The promotion of a third-party candidate in these battlegrounds could change the pathway for a victory for the major party nominee, even if Kennedy only garners single-digit support next November. Okay. The 7 states will initially focus on, oh, you guys need to reword this, honey. Who wrote this article? The 7 states, oh, okay. The 7 states we will initially focus on have a total of 183 electoral college votes. Everybody counting this? Take notes, son. 183 electoral college votes and some of the highest populations in the country. That's PAC founder Tony Lyons. He said this in a statement. The Super PAC originally planned to also work on gaining ballot access in Indiana, Colorado, and Nevada, but have dropped them from the list after advice from their counsel. I'm actually surprised they dropped Nevada. I understand Colorado, but I'm surprised they dropped Nevada and Indiana. Because I would think he would appeal. Nevada can be wishy-washy, right? And Indiana, I would think he could appeal to voters in Indiana as well. That's interesting. Interesting. But American Values 2024 will still dedicate between 10 to 15 million to smaller list of states. A statement outlining the new plan also said it's confident that Kennedy could win a contingent election, a possible scenario where no presidential candidate gets 270 electoral college votes. Under such a scenario, congressional delegations from each state cast votes to choose the next president. This is the method that Roger Meadows was referring to, that these third-party and independent candidates make it so that neither Dem nominee or Republican nominee get to the 270 votes. That's actually smart. I'm not going to hate on it. I'm still pissed at RFK because of his Israel position, but that's actually a smart strategy. And when it comes to ballot access, so it appears that RFK Jr. has just met the signature threshold in Utah to qualify for the ballot. Now, this is interesting because Cornell West actually also, I don't know what's going on with Utah, but Cornell West also recently had like a town hall meeting in Utah as well. So interesting. It says RFK Jr. has met the signature requirement to qualify to be on Utah's 2024 general election presidential ballot. The Salt Lake County Clerk's office confirmed to CBS News Thursday, pushing the independent candidate one step closer to getting on the ballot in that state. So he met the 1,000 signature threshold needed, and that is according to Salt Lake County's voter services manager, Ron Buckley. Okay, so we have RFK Jr. meeting the threshold for Utah. Now, we talked about that strategy so far. But here's a strategy. I don't know whose idea this was. I'm about to show you this video clip. I don't know who came up with this. I don't know who's making these kind of decisions. Here's a strategy that I don't think was a good idea. RFK Jr. released a video acknowledging the Armenian genocide. And it's just, given what he has said about the Palestinian people and the current ongoing genocide right now in Gaza, this is just very damning. It's very damning. And this is just so much. It's so, oh my God. We're gonna bring it up. Here we go. I couldn't believe this when I saw this the other night. I was like, is this for real? Is he serious? To help avert yet another war and uphold the principles of freedom and democracy, the U.S. government needs to mobilize regional support for the Armenians' right to self-defense and self-determination. I'm not even making this up, you guys. It's not comedy hour. But how can you acknowledge that the Armenian people need the right for self-defense and self-determination, but you can't do that for the Palestinian people? Listen to the video. Oh, honey, I don't know whose idea this was.
Over 100 years ago, during World War I, the Ottoman Empire perpetrated the first genocide of the modern era when it murdered 1.5 million ethnic Armenians. That ethnic cleansing wiped out thousands of years of Armenian presence in Anatolia. Today, the oldest of all Armenian territories is now the victim of an ethnic cleansing campaign. This time it's Artsakh, also known as Nagorno-Karabakh.
So he can acknowledge ethnic cleansing campaign. See, you see what's happening here? He can acknowledge that there was ethnic cleansing in reference to the Armenian people. He can acknowledge that. Cannot acknowledge it when it comes to the Palestinian people, though.
During the Soviet era, the Kremlin forcibly incorporated this Christian territory into Muslim Azerbaijan. Artsakh had been Orthodox Christian and Armenian for over 1,000 years. It has one of the oldest, most beautiful cathedrals in the world. Beginning in 2020, Azerbaijan ruthlessly launched an ethnic cleansing campaign against this peaceful and peace-loving people. It systematically bombarded population centers with cluster bombs and missiles.
Isn't this the same thing happening in Gaza? Isn't this the same thing? And by the way, yes, the Armenian genocide was no joke. The United States government didn't even acknowledge that until Donald Trump's presidency, if you can believe it or not. It's real. It happened. It is what it is. It was wrong. But when you look at these pictures, how does this look any different from what you're seeing in Gaza right now?
And in September, Azerbaijan launched an unprovoked invasion and expelled all 120,000 ethnic Armenians. While the world was focused on Gaza and Israel with indignation and outrage from every direction, we heard almost nothing about this mass expulsion of the entire population of one of the oldest Armenian states on the planet. Empty condemnations of this ethnic cleansing campaign are not enough. Unlike the 1915 genocide, this one is reversible.
You guys hearing this? You hearing this shit? Are you hearing this? So see, this right here tells me, this is why I feel like it's personal for him. I feel like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like he has something against whether it's the religion, whether it's because, a lot of the Palestinian people in Gaza are Muslim, even though they're also Palestinian Christians, they're also Palestinian Jews. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's just he's taken AIPAC money, which probably it could be both. It could be a combination of things. But to sit here and actually acknowledge ethnic cleansing of another group, but you can't acknowledge it when it's happening to the Palestinian people, this is clown shit. Like, I can't.
The U.S. government needs to organize and mobilize the global community to take action to ensure the safe return of Armenians to Artsakh and to defend their right to self-determination. This is a situation where peaceful sanctions could actually work. The U.S. still has leverage in that region, and it can use that power to mobilize all of the nations in that region to.
So he supports sanctions in reference to for the Armenian people. He supports sanctions, but he's against BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, when it applies to the state of Israel on behalf of the Palestinian people.
Reverse this humanitarian tragedy. We should also seek the removal of the blockades in Armenia by Turkey and Azerbaijan.
Go back to that one, honey. Now he's talking about removal of blockades.
Tragedy. We should also seek the removal of the blockades in Armenia by Turkey and Azerbaijan.
But won't agree to the removal of the blockade of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Won't agree to won't acknowledge the illegal settlements that are happening in the West Bank by the state of Israel. Still wants the Palestinian peoples to be caged in like animals. But when it comes to another group, he has no problem admitting, okay, we need to remove the blockade and we need to implement some type of peaceful sanctions.
Armenia is a landlocked nation and it needs access to ports and to the surrounding countries. As President of the United States, I will use diplomacy, our moral authority, our economic leverage, and sanctions to restore Armenia to a nation of peace and justice. I want to commit this country to the restoration of the sovereignty of Armenia and Artsakh, and to the restoration of its territory. I want to do this peacefully. Instead of starting another war somewhere, I'd like to stop one.
I don't know whose idea this was. Like, it's laughable to me. There's no way. No way. I saw this the first time I watched this, I was laughing my ass off. I was like, are you serious? So there's that. So that's RFK in reference to strategy. Now we move on to Cornell West in reference to strategy here. There's something, I don't know if you've noticed this. Cornel West is focusing on different areas as well. You'll see this with Jill Stein and RFK and Cornel West. Cornel West has been primarily focusing on some of the rural areas that I didn't think that he would go to. Here's an example here in reference to strategy. Cornel West said, what a blessing it was to meet the precious people of Omaha, Nebraska. This campaign is on the move, and we look forward to seeing you in 2024. So I have a piece, just a piece of this clip here that I do want to say. Listen to what he said to people in Omaha, Nebraska. And this is really interesting. Like I said, he spoke to people in Utah. He went to Mississippi, to rural part of Mississippi, to speak to people there. He's going to areas that I think people may not have expected him to go to. And it was recently announced by Dr. West that he tends to focus on Muslim voters in Michigan that no longer want to support Joe Biden. So there's that too. Let's get into this.
And the question becomes, how do we reintroduce America to the best of itself? Are you going to end up losing your planet with ecological catastrophe? We were there at the coal plant, weren't we? And we did a video and we told them, you said you're going to shut down this coal plant 4 years ago, and you still got it here. And you know it's targeting mainly the vulnerable ones, the ones that you think are not organized enough to bring power and pressure to bear. You're not doing that on the other side of town. We need to shut it down and shut it down now. That's environmental racism at the deepest level. And nearly every empire undergoes fundamental dissolution based on military overreach abroad. America has 800 military units around the world, special operations in 100 countries. Wow. Isn't that something? Russia got 29 and China's got 4. Wow. We got 800. Why? Because we got to be an empire to dominate every corner of the globe. That's what the elite say in Washington. They want total dominance across the board. And I could hear the best of my folk, my tradition saying, America, why don't you just be a decent and dignified nation among nations? Treat other nations the way you would want to be treated. Take the golden rule seriously. What makes you think that somehow you, like Rome, have to be the grand empire to dominate the whole world, while the 1% at home are dominating the poor and working classes of all colors? It's spiritually obscene. It's morally bankrupt. No social experiment can survive over time. With military overreach abroad, massive corruption among elites in both parties, the two-party system itself more and more an impediment. If all we can do is come up with a Trump leading us toward a second civil war and Biden leading us toward a third world war, we in a world of trouble. We in a world of trouble.
So there's Cornel West again. That is Omaha, Nebraska, of all places. And you can see the people in the room, different peeps, right? talking to them about foreign policy decisions that have happened under the two-party system. And I think that that's really important. You know, I'm glad that he had that conversation with people, but that's one of those places people would not think to go to. Now, why is Nebraska important? I'll let you guess. Anyone in the chat, tell me why you think the state of Nebraska is important in reference to a presidential election. We'll see. I'll give it a couple seconds to see who can guess. Public domain says does not need a teleprompter. Anybody know? Kingy said farmers. No. It's the birthplace of Terrence Bud Crawford. No. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Someone got it. Someone got it. Where is it? I want to make sure I get the first person. Shoot, I saw it. Team Orca, says they have a funky electoral college. And where's the other one? Want to see more said guess electoral votes. Getting warmer, getting warmer. Tomfoolery. They apportion electoral college differently. Nebraska, that's right, Cool Blue, split electoral votes. Ding, 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 ding. Nebraska, there's a district in Nebraska that has ranked choice voting. So Nebraska is important. Just FYI. Now, also in reference to the strategy, we talked about RFK Jr. getting the signature requirement for Utah. Dr. Cornell West actually received ballot access for Alaska, and I'm going to tell you why Alaska is important. It says Dr. West receives Alaska ballot access with ambitious $10,000 UBI initiative. Independent candidate Dr. West, backed by Alaska's Aurora Party, has obtained ballot access in Alaska for the 2024 U.S. presidential election, making him the first independent candidate in the state to achieve the feat. So that's huge. But listen to this part. This is the big piece. As part of the Aurora Party nomination and party line ballot access achievement, Brother West will introduce a significant plan to raise the Alaska permanent dividend to $10,000 per resident as part of a larger plan to eliminate poverty within the state. Let me talk about Alaska for just a second. Alaska has a UBI. If I remember correctly, I think the UBI that residents received in Alaska was like, what, $1,000 a year or something like that? And they get it from the oil industry. Dr. West is basically telling them that he wants to give them $10,000 per resident. Remember, Alaska, it's an oil state, right? Like a lot of people that live in Alaska, they work for like the oil companies. So that's important, the UBI. There's another reason why Alaska is important, because Alaska has ranked choice voting. So we're looking at we're looking at all the strategies here, folks. We're looking at all the strategies. And then there was this piece here from Dr. West, which I think was a very smart move, which it seems like this was encouraged by Sam Husseini. This call here in reference to Israel and Palestine, which is something that honestly RFK Jr. should be doing too. Everybody should be doing this that's running for president right now. He said it's time for the world to invoke the Genocide Convention and bring such a case before the International Court of Justice. Holding leaders like Netanyahu and the IDF accountable is not just an obligation, a legal obligation, but a moral one. We must take a stand against all form of human rights violations and actively work towards peace and accountability. And he was actually retweeting Sam Husseini here because Sam said the ICC has been worse than useless. West, like Lula and others, has called Israel's slaughter genocide. So he should call for invoke genocide convention at the ICJ now. Now, if he got on the phone to parliamentarians around the world, he could probably make it happen. So Dr. West saw that, retweeted that, and he actually mentioned that in the interview with Piers Morgan recently. So that is actually a good call. That was a smart move by Dr. West. And I want to let you know today, I found out it was announced that South Africa has actually decided to invoke the Genocide Convention. So just FYI. So that's a smart move in reference to strategy. Now we're talking about pros and cons with everybody, right? So in reference to the cons, we all know that Dr. West's presidential campaign did not get off to a good start, right? He started with the People's Party, left the People's Party, went to the Green Party, left the Green Party and decided to run as an independent. So it didn't have the best start out the gate. One of the other things that I would say is that I think when looking at Dr. West's political platform, his presidential platform for 2024, I think if I were to take all of those policies there that he has and roll it up into a big ball, I would put it under an umbrella of demands and focusing on corruption. And I think that would make all of those pieces gel together. You have to call out the fact that people are corrupt. Another con that I would say, I think that Dr. West is a little too nice towards Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden is a fascist. I think Joe Biden needs to be called out. He has been calling Joe Biden out, but I think he's still a little too nice considering, what's happening under Joe Biden now. So there's that. So that's Cornel West's strategy. And now we are moving on to Dr. Jill Stein. We're going to talk about her strategy. Jill Stein, one of the things that she's been doing is that she's been also showing up at Palestine protests. Dr. West has done this as well, but she showed up at Bath Iron Works. So this was pretty huge. It says Dr. Jill Stein joins the main coalition for Palestine protests at Bath Iron Works. Dr. Stein, the 2016 and 2024 Green Party presidential candidate, came to Maine on Friday, December 8th, 2023, to join the main coalition for Palestine protests at Bath Iron Works. The protest was held to demand that General Dynamics / Bath Iron Works stop arming Israel's genocide in Gaza. Other groups participating in the protests included Maine Voices for Palestinian Rights, Students for Justice in Palestine from various college campuses, etc. And you can see there was the advertisement for it there. So that is something that Jill Stein has been doing. She's been talking about foreign policy for a long time. Everyone knows that Jill Stein is anti-war. So this isn't something that she just started talking about recently. She's been talking about this for quite a long time. The other thing about Jill Stein that you got to remember is that, like Cornel West, Jill Stein did not start out as a politician. She's a medical doctor. Dr. West is an academic, right? So these are things to remember. She doesn't come from a political family. He doesn't come from a political family, right? RFK Jr. does come from a political family. But so in reference to strategy with Jill Stein, one of the things that she's doing is she's focusing on a lot in reference to the war climate, anti-war, and she's also making that connection to the climate disaster that we have in the world. So she's putting those two things together. The other thing is this. Jill Stein is running through the Green Party. The Green Party has its criticisms, has its problems as well. But Jill Stein just got this. And this is also going to be huge. In 2016, Jill Stein, the presumed 2024 Green Party candidate, got about 34,000 votes, 1.3% of the vote in Arizona. Biden beat Trump by 12,000 votes in the state of Arizona in 2020. The Green Party was not on the ballot. Stein could be the difference in 2024. And check this out. Breaking news. We are on the ballot in Arizona. Congrats to Arizona Green Party for this huge win, bringing Green Party ballot access to 20 states and counting. So when we talk about strategy, why is Arizona important? Same thing as I said about with RFK Jr. Arizona, again, is important because there were a lot of independent voters that showed up in 2020 to support Joe Biden. Now that you have the Green Party on the ballot in Arizona, things will be different this time around. Remember, they were not on the ballot in Arizona in 2020. That's huge. So she's on the ballot in Arizona. West is on the ballot in Alaska. RFK Jr. just got the signatures for ballot access in Utah. She goes on to say, we're well on the way to getting our urgently needed pro-worker, anti-war climate action campaign on the ballot across the U.S. When we're talking about strategy, right now, out of all the three candidates, Jill Stein has the most ballot access. She is on the ballot in 20 states in the country. It's not even 2024 yet. And if I am willing to make a bet, 9 times out of 10, she's probably going to get access in over 40 states like she did when she ran in 2016. That's one of the perks, one of the good things about running through the Green Party, because they already started with ballot access for a number of states from the beginning, right? So now I know you guys are waiting to hear what I have to say. There's one more thing about Jill Stein, and there's this. She's been here before. Jill Stein has ran for president before. RFK and Cornel West have not. Jill Stein knows the tricks that the media will play because she's been through it before. She knows how to handle it because she's been through it before. She's been arrested for showing up to debate. And they said that she could not debate. So she knows what's coming her way. And then there was also this. That time that Jill Stein had to remind people what it actually means to have a true democracy in this country. Listen to this. And this woman is a doozy.
Or more kind ways of putting it. Out front now, Jill Stein, 2016 Green Party presidential candidate. Jill, I appreciate your time. Good to have you back. So, you know, you've been there. You ran as a third party candidate. Should Howard Schultz run?
Well, you know, it's not for me to say, put it that way. I think this is up to the voters. And, you know, I think the panic, the spoiler panic that we're seeing is in many ways a reflection of the panic about, you know, the state of our economy, the state of our climate, the state of our health care, which 30 million Americans don't have any access to, and those who've got health insurance can't afford it. You know, people are really understandably focusing their panic about the economic emergency that most Americans are facing on this election. Understandably, but there's a win-win solution here. We don't have to shut down debate and dialogue in our democracy. We don't have to be in the business of blaming and shaming independent and third-party voters or independent and third-party candidates. There's a solution called ranked choice voting, and everybody should know about it and demand that we have it. The people in the state of Maine just got it. It does away with any possibility of a split election. Spoilers, it makes sure that we have candidates elected by majorities, and it gets rid of negative campaigning. So it's a win-win.
So look, when it comes to the, you know, and I understand you've been advocating for that, but the system we have coming into this election, right, is still what it is. I mean, given
we have
that,
2 years.
Well, yeah, I mean,
2 years until the next election, and we can wait. If half of the, panic that was focused on silencing candidates, which is not good for democracy, if instead that energy were put into lobbying our legislature and getting state legislatures, that's what it takes. This doesn't have to pass in Congress. It can just be at the level of states. There are like 12, a dozen or so states right now that have all Democratic legislatures and a Democratic government that could pass this in the blink of an eye.
You dealt with it, is what I'm saying. You're not surprised by what you call the panic that is greeting Howard Schultz.
I really understand, that people are, anguished, are just in a state of emergency right now, and that gets focused not always on the most productive places. We need to fix that with a functioning democracy. Choice is essential. There are 100 million voters right now who are not voting because these are largely black, brown, poor, and millennial who've really been locked out of our economic system and locked out of our political system. We need to bring them back in. Choice is not the enemy of a fair and just
turnout in
voting
this country,
system.
of course, has
Notice how Aaron tried to cut Jill Stein off when she started to mention black and brown communities, and also when she started to mention that the voters should have a choice. We don't need to see this entire interview. I just wanted to show you that because, again, there was that argument about voters having a choice. That video is from 4 years ago. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to give you my response. And you may have a different opinion than me. That's totally fine. It is what it is. Who do I think has the best strategy at this point in time? And I'm going to put my bias to the side and just go off of what I just showed you. If we look at what RFK Jr. is doing, focusing on those seven states, that's actually a good idea. I'm not going to hate on that. No shade. Just keeping it real. That's actually a good idea. That could actually work. This effort of preventing Joe Biden or Donald Trump from reaching 270 and then throwing it back to the states. That could actually work. No shade. If we look at what Cornell West is doing in reference to strategy, it actually is a good idea to go to these states, these areas that have a different policy in reference to electoral college, to go to states that have ranked choice voting. That's actually smart. Going to some of these rural communities that have been forgotten about, that's a good idea. If we look at Jill Stein's strategy, running through the Green Party, a party that already had ballot access, now she's got 20 states. She's on the ballot in Arizona, showing up at these protests. Cornell has shown up as protest as well. Good idea. Now for my decision. Who do I think has the best strategy overall? If I had to bank on it right now, I would say the best strategy overall belongs to Dr. Jill Stein. And I'm going to tell you why I believe that. Although I do think RFK Jr. has a good idea in reference to focusing on those 7 states and trying to prevent each president from getting to 270. I totally get that. I think what is going to may hurt RFK Jr., particularly as we get closer to the election and more comes out about his position with Israel. I think what may hurt him is his position on Israel and Gaza. If RFK Jr. does not have some type of change of heart around this issue, or he's not willing to have this conversation with people who are more knowledgeable about what the Palestinian people are going through, I think that could hurt him, particularly with younger voters. There's also this issue. Focusing on those 7 states, while I do think that's a good idea, if you're only focusing on 7 states, you're also opening up yourself to the possibility that 1 or 2 of those states could decide to remove you from the ballot. And then you only had those 7 states. Now you only got 5. There's that possibility as well. Although I think Cornel West's idea of focusing on the rural areas and focusing on places that have ranked choice voting, I think that's a good idea as well, too. But the reality is right now, RFK Jr. has Utah, Dr. Cornel West has Alaska. Looking at it as it is right now, Jill Stein has ballot access in 20 states, and she will get more. She's going to get over 40. She's already done this before, so she knows how to do it. So there's that. 2, Jill Stein has basically combined the worker movement with the anti-war movement as a part of her campaign. That's why you saw in the tweet I showed you, she said, we're working on building a solid worker movement / anti-war. She's put those 2 together, which I think everyone should be doing. She was at the Bath Ironworks, etc. Yada, yada, yada. And then there's also the thing that Jill Stein has been through this before. She knows what she's going to face as a third party candidate. She knows what the media is going to do. She knows all those things are coming. So again, I don't think at the end of the day, because of the system that we have in place, do I think any of these candidates are actually going to win? Most likely, no. But we have to build it. You have to build third party movement. You have to build this anti-duopoly movement, which actually, if Bernie Sanders would have left the Democratic Party, if he would have left and actually went forward with that draft Bernie campaign and moved over towards like third party option, we wouldn't be talking about this today. We wouldn't be talking about possibly building a third party or independent movement. It would have already been done. And we would be further along than we are today. But based on what I see right now, I think that Jill Stein has the best strategy. Does that mean that I think Jill Stein is going to win? No, not absolutely. I think, again, like I said, I get where RFK Jr. is coming from, but I think the more states you have, the more ballot access you have, the better. Because the reality is, we don't know if New York or the other states that RFK Jr.'s campaign is focusing on, you don't know. They could do the same thing to him that some of the states have done to Marianne. They could choose to remove him from the ballot. We don't know. That's why you can't just focus on the 7. But I get what they're trying to do. But if I said who has the best strategy right now, I would say that Jill Stein has the best strategy. We'll have to wait and see what happens in 2024. But that's my review for those 3 candidates and their independent third party run for the end of 2023. Let me go to some of the comments here and we'll finish up with the Tucker story. Where did I go to? Oh, this one. Thank you for the super chat. Nobody voting Nikki Haley. Ukraine war is just a money laundering scheme. Thank you, Cool Blue. All those states except Arizona are 10 populous states. Approximately 53% of all citizens live in a top 10 state. California has 12% alone. Thank you, Flower Bro. Thank you for interviewing Claudia de la Cruz. The Party for Socialism and Liberation is truly a revolutionary party and a sign of a brighter future in this country. Thank you, Flower Bro. Thank you, Roger. The more candidates in the race, the less electoral college votes needed to win. 3 need 180. 4 need, are you trying to say you need? For 3, you need 180. 4, you need 135. And 5 candidates, you only need 108 electoral college votes to win. Good point, Roger. Thank you for this, Sab. He trying to get that Armenian vote in California. He trying to get the Kardashian vote, Roger.